not. But yes, everybody will definitely agree that India has been a culturally very rich country, and the different type of art form we have, I don't think any other country might have it. So I'm very happy to welcome all our guests and also the entire team of Art First, so who are working very hard to bring this session for us. So I welcome everyone, and let us move on and listen to our speakers. So I welcome everyone here today once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pradnya, for that very warm welcome. And we're very grateful and excited to be invited by the SNDT Department of Education to make this presentation today. And a very warm welcome to everybody who's viewing the webinar today. I'm going to dive right in and start with my first question to Ritu. So Ritu, Art1st was established in 2009, and as the founder of Art1st, can you tell us about the rationale behind Art1st? What drove you to create this model?
Okay, so before I begin, it's been a journey of 10 years, and every time I still meet people, very often they still ask me, so what is Art1st? Is it a hobby class? And then they say, oh, do you do painting? Or is it drawing? Are you teaching, children how to paint and draw? Do they do sculptures? And it's been 10 years and I still repeat the same thing, and I'm going to repeat it again for all of you, that art for us is not really about drawing. It's not about painting. It's all a subset of art. But if you look at art, it's a deep learning subject. It's also a very expressive subject, and it takes you into the domain of cognition. And, so when I reflect on it very often, and I think, why is it that when a subject as deep as art, and also, as you said, Dr. Pragna, that culturally, we've been very rich and we've been very gifted. And if we go back to our Vishnu Dharmottara Puran, you'll see the entire Chitra Sutra, which talks about how to approach art. So how come something which was so ancient, so sublime, so beautiful, has completely been relegated to the status of a hobby class? And I think for me, that was extremely troublesome, very bothersome, and which is what got me to explore this deeper. I also saw it very closely with my own son, and when he was growing up and what he was learning in school and what he was doing at home. And again, there was a big disparity between the kind of works that he was creating. I also traveled, and when I met a lot of people across India, I also realized that everyone is craving for that shift and for that respect that the subject deserves. But nobody's been able to kind of break those barriers within school system or create systemic changes, which is really required. And I think that is what kind of inspired me to say that we do need to bring art back in education. We do need to look at art as a subject, as a core subject, and not as a hobby class. And at the core of it is the child. And when you look at the child is full of imagination. They're creative. They are bursting with stories. And how come we're not giving them a platform in school to be able to capture that? And I think those were some of the things that kind of inspired me to explore this further and create a company, an organization, which started off with something that I believed in. But today it's more like a collective. So every single person that you're going to be engaging with today is equally responsible for getting Art1st to where it is and to growing it as a collective.
That's great. And so let's go deeper into Art1st. Let's talk about curriculum. What was the thinking behind the curriculum? How was the curriculum designed? And also, I know that we have a series of wonderful books that go along with the curriculum and different models that were created to disseminate the curriculum. So let's go deeper and learn more about that, Ritu.
Absolutely. So when we started this in 2009, I think we started with a lot of research groups with children. Nicola, I'll see that a little later. And the whole idea was, when I was exploring it, to really understand the child and to understand how is it that they are consuming this knowledge. What is it that we can kind of give them that can help them express, which is not just technique-led. but which is also rooted in this whole theory of thinking. Um, and also, as I said, I traveled a lot in South, West, North, East. Unfortunately, I couldn't cover, but I realized that there does not exist a very structured curriculum. You know, if you go back to our national curriculum framework, the policies are beautiful, but when you look at the implementation of it, unlike a core subject where you have very defined textbooks, you have curriculum books, we have nothing for art. And again, my whole question was, why is it that we've not thought of it? Why are we not looking at art as a subject, as a core subject? So that was one thing that inspired me, and we collected, and I met up with my professors in LSR, and I was doing my psychology there. So they were very, they obliged us. I got artists, I got historians. And what we did was study different frameworks across the world, and then we arrived at our own. So we also looked at what was being done in the US, in Europe, and in India. We looked at Nai Talim. We tried to also understand what is it that NCERT and CBSE was trying to do. And with it, we came up with a curriculum which was very, again, rooted into the artistic development of the child. Likla, can you show this slide, please? Next. Next. Can you just come to the slide where, so again, if you look at it, this is just the beauty of what children do and what they create. But how we got inspired to kind of look at a curriculum like this was look at three components. So we explored the emotional component, which is also related to the mind. So what about your emotions, your feelings, and how are you kind of responding to that? Yeah, Likla, that's fine. Thank you. We also then looked at the cognitive development of the child. And when we talk of cognition, we go very deep into the critical creative thinking of the child. And what is it that we look at? How are they discovering, or how accidental is their learning? What kind of reasoning do they bring to the fore when they're trying to talk about their work? Are they reflective practitioners? And when we were focusing more on the social aspect of it, which also talks about their emotions, their engagement with the community, their engagement with their peers, it also led to a lot of engagement between children and discussion, which was just not related to, I am drawing a mountain and I'm doing rivers. But it was, again, a conversation which led us to understand that we need to also shift from how we're looking at art as just a very technical, technique-led curriculum to a thinking-based curriculum. And for me, it was very important to understand the child, because at the end of the day, you know, the child is as good as the mentor you put in front of them. They're like sponges, they absorb it all. So again, what was the kind of inputs that we needed to give them, which was age appropriate? Nikla, next slide, please. And so what we did was we studied the preschool, primary and middle. We first focus on the primary school, and the reason being that, you know, there's a lot of research which is being done which talks about the fourth grade slump, which basically means that unless and until you are able to nurture, retain, hold on to the creativity of the child, by the time they are in 6th or 7th grade, they get so regimented in their way of thinking because of our school structures, it becomes very difficult to break that habit of thinking. And so we said, let's start with grade 1 to 5. And what is it that we're focusing on? When I look at the cognitive characteristics, the mind is very logical. But initially, grade 1 to 3, the mind looks at things which are very concrete. But from 3rd grade onwards, towards the end of 3rd grade, you see a transition where they're able to understand concepts which are a little abstract. What also happens is, from I, me, myself, their universe expands. And so slowly, gradually, from teacher, parent, to siblings, to peers, to school community, then the community that they live in, and it keeps expanding. And all of that transformation actually takes place in this elementary stage. So we said, what is it that we need to do to kind of really inspire children? And we said the best way to do it is let them explore. And how do they explore? The pillars that became, cemented for us was that when you're engaging with art, you can't take away the core of what art is. It is fun. It's absolutely engaging when you're playing with colors or you're exploring a different material. So anything that we did had to be rooted through fun. So it had to be a playway method of engaging with our children. The other thing that we realized is that if I pose a problem to all of you, and I can see 68 people here, I'm sure I have 68 different answers. And you're not going to come up with the same answer to a problem that I pose. And so it was all about possibilities, that children in a class to a same project could look at different expressions. And expression, of course, is key to our curriculum, and it's also about expression, which is talking about their feelings. It's talking about how they think, how they feel, how they're engaging with the world outside. And it's a complete immersion of their body, mind, intellect, where the senses are engaged, the emotions are engaged, and how they're thinking also comes out to the fore. Uh, with that, we also explored preschool. Preschool was all about looking at material. And when you're talking about material, it's very tactile. So it's experimentation, it's also accidental discoveries. And very often they get excited when they mix different colors and they have a varied color and they have a name for each and every color that they make. I'm sure something that we lack, and we'll think 100 times before we decide on what name to give that color, but they're very spontaneous. But as you go higher, 6th to 8th grade, because we are with the children right from the beginning, we're able to kind of, again, retain their interest. But that's also the time when it's very important to understand where they come from, the kind of changes that they themselves are going through as individuals, to provide them a platform where they're heard, where their views are heard, where their thoughts are kind of accepted, and it becomes an osmotic process. And that's when the transformation takes place. So it's a fairly in-depth model that we kind of arrived at. And with that, Dikla, can you go to the next slide, please? We developed a full-fledged curriculum right from preschool. So the 2 books that you see are very game-led. So when you open it, there are puzzles, there's jigsaw, and everything is focused on how a child can observe and be a keen learner. You will be surprised that they sit with our books for 40 minutes at a stretch without being disturbed. And I think that's commendable for us, because those are the kind of things that we look for when we talk of rewards. Our curriculum book, grade 1 to 5, all the artworks that you see as a cover pages is done by children in our classes. The other thing that we encourage is we do not allow our educators to interfere with the way a child expresses. And it's their thinking process that becomes really critical. So we, again, when we look at our curriculum books, we had a very defined process of how we looked at it. We have stories which are based on the concepts of art. These lead to appreciation. It also leads to art history and very open-ended projects. And as you go higher, it's sequential, and it gets, obviously, the levels kind of become more difficult. But at the end of it, it's a cohesive platform that we've kind of created for our children. So that's about the curriculum. I'm not going to talk more because I think I've kind of hogged a lot of your time. But I'm going to kind of dive straight into asking Sangeeta, because she's been such an integral part of our journey right from the beginning, to really understand how do we need to look at our training program. How do we inspire our educators, and what is it that we need to share with them that can open up the space for them? Sangeeta, would you like to share your experience?
So, thank you, Ritu. And so all of you by now have gathered that how intense, interesting, and innovative the Art1st curriculum is. So when I met Ritu and I had this, complete walk through the curriculum, I was spellbound, and I wanted this to reach every child and every school in the rural and urban India. I thought should have this curriculum. And that's when Ritu, requested me that I should support them to train art teachers. And my first response was, but I'm not an artist. And over a period of time, I think the entire work and engagement with Art First changed my entire thought process that each one of us is an artist in our own little way. So, how do we train our teachers was a question. So, we began by classroom observations, and that exists even today, dear friends. When we observe our teachers, there's another sad part that uh, not all schools follow the principle of observing co curricular subjects. But that's something that I was fortunate to not have that mental model. And when I observed our teachers as an assessor, as a headmistress, I realized that the pedagogical practices are missing. So, what do I mean by pedagogical practices? So, the art of questioning, the feedback skills, the fade in, fade out, the set induction, lesson plans are not really very structured, are not made at all. Um, and the entire aim is to, the focus is teaching and being instructive. And now here I have an art first curriculum, which kind of gets needs an art teacher to be very participatory and interactive in classroom. And so, how do we kind of bridge the gap? So, we realized that we needed to bring in a lot of training related to these pedagogical practices. So, we thought that, okay, let's dive into it. And all of us pedagogues, those who've been in the mainstream education, the curricular subjects, so to speak, and the artists, we sat together and we did a lot of brainstorming. And then we said the first thing is that if we want the curriculum or art to get into as an important approach to develop creative thinking, not just as a tool, but as a way of thinking, then we need to look at that the art teachers need to develop the skill of questioning. And there has to be a feedback which is very constructive. There has to be lesson planning because there has to be a lot of, blend of different approaches to teach the different topics. There has to be a lot of research because unfortunately, we've all done drawing in school, but we've not learned art because even after so many years, I really don't know who are the leading artists in my country or even out in the world. It's thanks to Art First that I'm slightly aware, but not really the way I would have liked to be. So there's never end to learning. So for all of these things, we needed the teacher to be really really an academician and not just an artist, not somebody who's just going to add on to an entertainment value in school or just appeal to the aesthetic beauty in this in school, decorate the school. So we needed the art teachers roles to be different. And so we they had to be, the training had to be such, and it needs to be such that a mental model needs to change, our thinking needs to change, and everybody in school needs to support the art teachers to do that. And so when we started the training, what were the topics that we took up? We took up skill of questioning, we took up feedback, we looked at lesson planning, different use of different creative thinking tools by De Bono. And let me tell you, we had a tough time. It was very challenging because challenging both for the pedagogues, for us facilitators, and art first mentors and the art teachers. They could not fathom why they had to know the theory, why they had to change their practice when they were all so skilled and they were creative in their own way. But any change is daunting, and it can be overwhelming when we introduce so many new topics and which is not part of your day-to-day work life. But the beauty was that nobody gave up, neither the art teachers where we have the art first curriculum, nor the pedagogues, nor the art first mentors. In fact, the artists were so sporting that they sat through the entire pedagogy sessions and also learned a lot. And I must mention Mr. Tushar Zog, who's no longer with us. We lost him, unfortunately, 2 years back. But he was one person who, was as an artist understood the importance of pedagogue. Of course, apart from Ritu, who was very, strong. And after the first round of training, let me tell you, there may be a lot of art teachers out there, but as a facilitator, in spite of so many years of training, I was so disappointed and I was heartbroken that all the preparation was not working. The art teachers were not enjoying the pedagogy sessions. So we went back to the drawing board. We looked at, reworked our models and created new models of training. We looked at providing learner guidance. We looked at providing demonstration, task centered, different ways of doing it. And believe me, friends, our plan, do, check, act cycle is on. We try and contextualize it as much as we can so that the art teachers are not overwhelmed and they really enjoy this uh, journey of training. So the training is all about brainstorming, research, reflection, and improvising all over again. Our aim is to enrich the art teachers' competencies. We want them to take the children from knowledge to creative thinking. That means all levels on the Bloom's taxonomy. And understanding the Bloom's taxonomy, the cognitive domain is simpler than understanding the affective and the psychomotor taxonomy. It's very, very complex. So we try to make it simple and we kind of looked at how best can we do it. But yes, the Bloom's taxonomy is something that needs to go to the art teachers so that the art curriculum is implemented in its true spirit, and we really are able to have a new generation of creative thinkers. And in all this, Ritu, I kind of really I'm very hopeful because in the last 6 years of training, we've seen evidence of small changes. But these changes have come about uh, also because post training, any kind of training, I've come to realize after so many years that teachers need hand holding post training. They need scaffolding, they need support, and the Art1st team is so brilliant in that respect, that post training, whatever support is needed by the learner, that is the art teacher, is given to him or her in the form of mentoring, in the form of guidance sessions, a one-to-one session. And that has really helped to bring about the changes in the way they perceive their roles and the way they kind of transact in the classroom. But the changes are very slow to come because adults learning principles tells us that it's very hard to break a habit and it's taking time. But I'm still hopeful that we are soon going to really revolutionize the way art is taught in schools. That's my thought on training and development.
I'm just going to add one small thing to this.
Yes.
Just to kind of give you an idea of how we implement the curriculum, we have a 5-stage process, starting right from doing a SWOC for our teachers to understanding the environment of the school so that we're able to bring about, again, systemic changes within their environment, which is beneficial for them. Then we have a very intense training program, three times a year, and we have another model where we do it twice a year. Our mentors do observations, again, nearly every month to twice a month. And there are different models that we follow. But what I'm trying, and then again, they're with the teachers 24/7 through their WhatsApp calls. So there's never a time when we leave our teachers alone. The minute we take on a school, the school is with us for either 3 years or 5 years, but we totally, completely embrace our teachers and take them through that journey, and we nurture them in the process. So having said that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift to Rivka. Rivka brings in great knowledge in this space of not just art education, but also digital education. And the reason why we are here today and talking to all of you is because of her, because she joined us and within 2 months, she got all of us on the digital platform. And there are great learnings there. So Rivka, I would like if you can share your learnings with us.
Sure, thanks, Ritu. Before I dive into Art1st, from Art1st to Art1st Digital, just a quick reminder to everybody, we do have 10-15 minutes at the end for questions and answers from our audience. You can put your questions in the chat box and we will address them. So please do that. We'd love to always address our audience's questions. So getting right to Art1st Digital. So what does that mean for us? I don't think I need to remind everybody under what circumstances we're living in. COVID has been the greatest disruptor of our times. It's our greatest challenge, and with that, it also we look at every challenge as an opportunity. At least that's the way we've looked at it. We have Art1st has always had a commitment to its teachers, to its schools, and to its children, and so even given the most challenging of circumstances, we made the decision to continue. And if I say what's with careful consideration, as with everything we do, the way we kind of broke it down is we had to consider what are the implications of this new way of learning and teaching conceptually and pedagogically, technically what are the considerations we need to have, and also the methodology of transacting your lessons through a screen. So I'll kind of speak to each of those areas a little bit. So again, we had to translate our vast repository of research and experience into an accessible program. And also at the same time, it's an opportunity to expand our scale, which means, what we can do in India, we can also reach further into India, within India, and also potentially globally. And what's being asked of everybody is to expand their ability to teach and learn through these platforms. So, utilizing every pedagogical approach we've learned from Dr. Gole and the other pedagogues that have worked with us, which translate to the screen, like visual thinking strategies, slow looking practices, Bloom's taxonomy, looking at storytelling also as a format through which we can teach and learn. We're constantly, we've taken an approach of constantly learning, adapting, and implementing, and taking those continuous lessons back. So it's been a process of um, uh, continuous improvement. And that's something when you're dealing with technology, that's something you always need to keep in mind with a digital platform, because the pace of change is so rapid. So even something that could work a few months ago, it does not work now, or there's something new and better. So that's kind of a state of mind you have to be in order to kind of work in the digital space. So that's really important. That's a mindset we had to adopt in order to adapt. I think technically, everybody gets, it's a little hesitant about dealing with the technology, but it really is more about, again, carefully considering who are the users, who are the people we're working with children, with educators, with teachers. What do they have access to? What is their knowledge base? And choosing the right platform that works also for the administration, teachers, and students. Some of the biggest concerns we've had is privacy, is access, is also abuse of the platform. So it's really important that it's a decision made considering getting all these people together, looking at the administration's needs, looking at the educators' needs, looking at the children's needs. So ease of use is always at the top. Security, privacy, it's a major consideration. We've also seen the technology industry has been so wonderful because they've adapted rapidly. Even the platform we're using today, Zoom, from where it started, they had I think a 500% increase in use, and they've created more functionalities to make it easy for everybody in the world to use. So it's not like we're tied to one technology, whether you're using Google Meets or Cisco WebEx or Zoom or whatever proprietary platform your school chooses to use. Even it needs to consider all those perspectives in order to make it useful and successful. So that's definitely a conversation that needs to have. Methodology, let me speak to methodology. So it's again, as Dr. Gole and Ritu has shared with you today, our interactions and engagements in the classroom and with our teachers who we train and with students is ultimately very interactive, it's very engaging. How do we translate this very hands-on experience into an engaging experience on screen? So we've adapted our sessions in a lot of ways. Screen fatigue is like part of our lives. So we've kind of broken down our trainings and sessions into more approachable sizes. So like instead of 2 hours or even all day trainings, it's in 2 hour or 4 hour blocks. Teachers have more time to process the content. We've had a great opportunity in terms of implementing micro teaching, again, breaking everything down into smaller pieces and really examining it closely. Within those sessions, the importance of questioning and learning skills, emphasis on a feedback format, We use a process and a tool called plus minus interesting for each for feedback and engagement and continuous improvement. We've translated visual thinking strategies to the screen. Also, one of the tools we've added to our repertoire is storytelling. And that's something we support our teachers in their training. Storytelling through the screen becomes a wonderful way to kind of engage and converting lessons into storytelling formats. We've had a very positive response to that process. Also, for the teacher, sessions can be recorded. Teachers can reflect on their teaching and learning style, looking at the viewing the recordings. Because also the classes are shorter formatted, they have to be planned down to the minute. There's an opportunity again to get very tight and very specific and focused with your lesson plans. And you can also now because of this of being online, you can also have flexibility with timings and with scheduling. So those are kind of some of the things we've some of the ideas we've kind of brought to the table in terms of adapting our training from a hands-on in real life experience to the screen. Yeah. So we also have a lot of online resources. I just want to point out we have a lot of online resources for teachers on our social media platforms. We're sharing exercises, we're sharing lesson plans, we're sharing resources, very short bite-sized pieces. We recommend starting a lesson with icebreakers and energizers, going into the beat of the lesson, and then also closing in a very kind of energetic note. So kind of keep the engagement very high throughout the time of your lesson. Just excuse me for a moment. Sorry, we're just having a technical issue. Okay, yeah. So so definitely if people have questions about digital, do put them in the Q&A chat box and we'll take them at the end of the session. My next question was for Ritu. So she's gotten kicked out, so we're going to get her back on. There she is. Right. Yeah. So currently, Art1st is implementing all its training programs online, okay? And we also are adapting to the school administration's programs and platforms. So we're very flexible and adaptable in that way. And we kind of mold our tools and teaching and training techniques. They're customized and localized to each school and each institution. So Ritu, my next question goes to you. Our entire practice is based in research. In 2019, Art1st conducted a series of roundtables across India, culminating in a summit in December 2019. We'd love to hear and learn more about the key findings and insights from the summit.
So as you've been hearing, the whole trajectory and from where we started to where we are today, it also forced us to think again very deeply and also understand what is the landscape of art education in India, right? I mean, we work in our own silos, but what is it that exists in this country that we need to be aware of? And I think that was the reason, the rationale behind why we said, let's collect thoughts, let's collect ideas, let's meet educators. And so we conducted this in 7 cities, Delhi, Bombay, Bhubaneswar, Odisha, Calcutta, Guwahati. In fact, Guwahati, we kind of had the entire northeastern region, and we invited them to be a part of it. Findings are very interesting. I mean, as I had earlier kind of mentioned, that we are at that threshold of change. We are restless as a community, and we do want to kind of initiate, changes that are impactful. But again, when you look at the crux of it, what we found is the practices were still very rudimentary. We can talk about a handful of schools, but when we look at the entire country, a lot of schools don't even have art teachers and art educators. Most of the time, the subject is taught more as an activity and as an extracurricular, so which obviously itself is self-explanatory. And what we realize in the process is the impact it has on the teachers and their esteem and their confidence. So what they land up doing is mostly what is asked of them, rather than taking the onus and taking the responsibility in their hand to bring about that shift. Most of the educators who spoke to us also came, they were professors, and there were interesting insights that they shared. And some of them were that, why is it that we're not localizing art education? Because culturally, we are so different. Each region brings in its own cultural, heritage, which is extremely rich, but it's not integrated in schools. How do we kind of bring about that shift? And small organizations, so it's difficult for us to kind of impact change at that large scale. So we decided then, after having done this for a year, to collaborate with IGNCA and CBSC, and we hosted a summit which had more than 100 principals, for 300 educators. And that's when we thought we need to address policy, we need to address advocacy, we also need to look at research as a model of education within our school systems. What we did was, we had a seminar which had speakers from across the world, which had interesting insights to share about their work. So if you're talking about museums, and how is museum integrating that knowledge into school systems, because museums do bring in that education aspect of it. If we were talking to people who had come from outside of India, the alternative methods of education, where school was without walls. In fact, Penny is a part of this, and she's sitting right there, if you can see her. An absolutely brilliant project where your learning is not defined by what is taught within the walls. But when you expand, that's when true integration takes place. And so when we started to talk about it, we also had interactive labs, and we invited, we had a science lab which integrated art in that component from Shrishti. We had Flow, which looked at actually virtual learning. We called people who talked about design thinking and the role of design thinking in creative education. And we also kind of created an interactive art lab where your learning is just not limited to what you do on a piece of paper, but it's a lot of hands-on learning. It's extremely experiential. And which also for us culminated in creating a white paper that focuses on very relevant, pertinent issues of how do we localize our curriculum? Is language a barrier in education? How do we change that? Is training an issue? Is knowledge upgradation an issue? And how can we address all of those? That's when I think everyone kind of partnered together to see how can we really impact change? How can we bring in this knowledge to each and every one of you as art educators, so you hold your subject with a certain sense of pride? Because what it does is it completely changes the mental landscape of a child, makes them more resilient, makes them emotionally more intelligent. It also raises your EQ. So why is it that we were really not holding on to what exists and what is there and implementing it? Which also brought us to the second question, and which is what I think most of you are very eager and keen to know is, this is about art and art education. What about integration? But I'm going to share with you that unless and until you know your subject, you can't integrate. Because integration isn't a tool or an aid for teaching. It is about bringing in two disciplines so that you create new learning. And that can happen only if you know what the subject is all about. And so we started with that. And today we are ready to talk about integration. And I'm going to invite Dr. Gole to share her views of how she has actually looked at the new policy, looked at the creative education that everyone is talking about, and what are the kind of changes and the shifts that we need to bring about to be able to truly implement it.
Thank you, Ritu. So I see that the National Education Policy 2020 has given art its rightful place. And you just talked about is should language be a barrier? So the multilingual approach and the focus on the multilingual approach in schools, I think will be a big aid to the art teachers, because I know of many schools who insist that the art teacher, the sports teacher should communicate with the children only in English because it's an English medium school. But at the end of the day, what are we looking at? We are looking at a child's holistic development. We are looking at whether the child, has understood what we are helping him to learn. So I think the art teachers will kind of benefit from the multilingual approach. And like I said, arts will be looked at academically and not just as a co-curricular subject. And when we're talking about art integration, I can see a lot of questions coming up. And like Ritu rightly said, that integration is not a standalone, kind of activity or an approach, but it is part of an entire curriculum framework that schools need to prepare and look at how different topics and concepts are aligned with each other grade wise. It's an exercise that will need to be undertaken. And I'm sure that all schools will begin that exercise, because without it, arts integration or even sports integration is not possible. So the role of art teachers hopefully will undergo a change, and they will be key partners along with subject teachers, to develop the students' creative thinking. There's going to be also a lot of research required in the area of assessments. How should we conduct art assessments, or even subject assessments are going to undergo a major change. So art teachers, I look at them as being equal partners now in conducting research along with subject teachers of how to kind of develop creative thinking, how to measure the learning outcomes. And I'm really very eager to see how this whole thing is kind of, how arts integrated learning is going to alter perceptions and practices. Really looking forward to it. And I think as Art First, as a team, we're all going to support as many schools as we can to kind of really understand this truly well.
Absolutely. So
So
what we're going to do, we are running a little short of time. Is it okay if we open it out to the audience and for their questions?
It's fine. Can I just make a short, last two statements? And one is that we're planning and working on how to, kind of bring in arts integration modules to as many art teachers as possible. So do remain in touch with the Art First team. And we're also looking at an art educators teachers certification program, to kind of enhance knowledge, skills, and the our teachers' competencies. So we would keep, everybody informed about it.
Just a reminder, we're
And
scheduled.
also, if there are any questions.
Yeah, sorry. We are scheduled to run till 4:15. So the last 15 minutes. So we do have 14 minutes to continue the discussion on art integrated learning. If I could jump in, I've actually brought an example, a couple of examples of art integrated learning, since I think that's a very hot topic. So I would ask Likla, could you jump to my slides, please? Yeah. So just to segue from what Dr. Gole was talking about in terms of the new direction of related to the National Education Policy 2020 and CBSE guidelines, I think what it has done to us, it has given us a greater urgency in our work, because our work is even more relevant at this moment in time. We've kind of built deep ground in various educational institutions in art education. And so now is the time to leverage that and to go to art integrated learning. So I wanted to share a few examples of how art integrated learning can be implemented. What does that look like? So number one, art integration is an inherently transdisciplinary and collaborative process. What does that mean within a school structure and a school system is that the administration has to create space and time for the art teacher and the art educator and the subject teacher to come together and engage. It means the art teacher is coming with their knowledge, the subject teacher, whether it's math, it's science, it's physics, it's geography, it's social science, it's history, it's literature, it's Hindi literature. Two teachers have to be at the table, and they're having that deep discussion, comparing their learning objectives and outcomes, and finding that commonality across subjects. So here in one example, if we can go to the first slide, go to the next slide. Likla, can we go to the next slide? Yeah, okay. In this example, this was done by artist mentor Tushar Jo at 7. Everybody can hear me. The objective was to explore and understand symmetrical and asymmetrical balance using, and it was sharing concepts, or what is sharing the concepts and principles of symmetry and asymmetry, and through the creation of through asymmetry. If you could go to the next slide. So again, like I said, and they have that discussion. I hope every week slower. And you can see the children are experimenting and demonstrating. Yeah.
Vishali, can you take this, please?
Yeah, so it looks like Rivka's internet speed has some issue. Can you hear me? Can you all hear me? Fine.
Yes,
okay, it looks like Rivka is back.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, could you please repeat, Rivka, the last thing that you said? We couldn't hear it.
Yeah, I said in this image, you can see students demonstrating the principle of symmetry and asymmetry to each other through their sculptural objects. Okay? So art integration becomes an extremely embodied way of learning, and the ideas and concepts get very cemented in the child's mind. Could we go to the next slide? Yeah. So we can just scroll through these images. Next, and the next image. So this is the next one is an example of English plus the visual arts. Again, it from the English subject teacher side, it was about vocabulary and creative writing. From the visual arts side, it was about learning about collage, and they create. So this is a poem. This poem was selected for its subject matter, theme, content, and also vocabulary. So the English took the students through the poem and pulled out the theme and the bigger ideas, as also underlined the new vocabulary words. So children learned about 8 to 10 new vocabulary words through this. They also went through a process of reflection, inquiry, and creative writing in response to this poem, and created their own poetry in terms of. So the theme of the poem is how we use a mask to repress our emotions and ourselves and who we really are, and maybe don't share what we need to share. So the poem had to kind of express that. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So using the theme again, going off the idea of a mask, we created a template of a mask, and students had written their poems at this point. They, using the technique of collage, they created a mask that reflected the themes and the content of their poem. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, you can see the work in progress in these slides. Keep going. Yeah, so in terms of presentation, what we did, we actually took images of the student with the mask and without the mask, and we also recorded them sharing their poem. So that was kind of the documentation, and assessment is also a very important part of this process. And that became part of the exhibit that we also displayed to the larger school. Keep going. Yeah, can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So you can see a couple of students' artwork. It was interesting because a lot of students in this class had experienced loss of close family members at a very young age, and they had an opportunity to express that loss through this. So it's a bit somber, but it was also celebratory. Yeah, can we go to the next slide? I think that's it. Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure you saw a few concrete ideas in terms of what art integrated learning looks like. Also, the art first approach, what's unique, we do take it a step further, where in addition to the subject teacher and the art teacher coming together, we can also engage with community organizations, whatever, and local NGOs that want to participate and kind of work with the children in school and extend that reach to the neighboring community. So the art integrated learning platform definitely lends itself to collaborations outside of the school environment and into the neighborhood and community, which again makes it a much, much richer experience for the student as well as for the teacher, and ultimately I think benefits the entire school and community as well. So on that note, if I would like to ask Dr. Rekha if she can field the questions from the audience, we'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, thank you, Rivka. Thank you so much. Well, you have tried your best to explain how art education can be integrated for teaching different subjects. But still, we have some questions, and those questions are specific to the specific subjects like physics, maths, Sanskrit. So the audience wants the example how one can integrate art in physics, in Sanskrit, or even in other subjects. So they want the examples how one can integrate. And again, they are also asking for teaching certain topics like motion, time. So how one can integrate art for teaching those particular topics from physics.
Okay, so Rekha, I'm going to take the one with Sanskrit, right? So who had asked this question? Sorry, can you?
It is asked by Sunita Rajiv.
So Sunita, my question to you, in fact, would be, before we even start integrating, have you seen the miniature art of India? And if you have, you will know that most of it, the root of it is the Vedas, and that is Sanskrit. And so how do you integrate it is pretty simple, that you need to know what exists. What is it talking about? You can talk about Ramayana through your miniature paintings. You can look at all the murals that exist in your temple architecture. And through that, you bring in history. So it all depends on your approach and how open are you to learning, researching, and finding out those sources that can help you bring in new learning into your environment. The same thing goes with physics, chemistry, sciences. You need to know art. And how many of us here sitting here know the subject? If we know the subject, we can integrate it. So there are mobile arts done by artists across the world, and you can then talk about motions through that. It's very important for all educators to know their art history, be it visual art history, be it music, be it theater or film. Unless and until we know our art history, integration becomes very difficult. I read somewhere they said that art is in all subjects. Absolutely, and there's a beautiful story that I'll share with you, which again comes from Vishnu Dharmotto Puran, where there was this child who wanted to learn, and I've modified it a bit. So he wanted to learn how to kind of paint. But to paint, the teacher said, oh, but you need to go to a chemistry class to understand the color compositions and the chemical reactions between colors. He went to the chemistry lab, he pushed him to another class, maybe he went to an English class to say, please understand poetry. And through poetry, feel the colors. Poor guy went around and came back to his teacher, said, there's no way I can learn how to paint. Because to paint, I need to know all the other subjects really well. And that's when the teacher said, you're ready to learn today. because you've understood the value of integration. So integration does not mean it's a tool. It means pick up the history, pick up the resources, understand it, and see how you can explain through that your history, pre-independence, post-independence, your Jallianwala Bagh. I mean, look at Chitto Prasad's work, and you will find the entire history narrated through his works. I don't know if I've answered your question, but if you have more questions, Rekha, happy to answer.
Thank you.
Yeah. There are a few more questions. There is another question asked by Christina. She is asking, what is your experience with the government schools when you propose your curriculum? So do you face any kind of resistance or, denial for your curriculum which you are suggesting? And she's curious to know more specifically for the government schools. So what is your experience when you propose your curriculum to those particular schools?
We have a different strategy here. I think Sangeeta and I, we burnt our fingers. We started off with working with the government on Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. And for 1 year, both of us went to that office again and again and again. From a large project, it became an activity. So we decided we have to change our stance because we're here to create, basically engage with our children and create that impact. So we work through foundations who already have access to the government schools. So we plug in our curriculum through them. And so we actually bypass the government. And once we are there, because those foundations are already working with those organizations, it becomes very easy for us to have the entire community on board. In fact, we've been working with the municipal schools for the last now 8 years. We've engaged with more than 30 municipal schools in Bombay. And now through some CSR projects, we are also taking on fewer schools, but we're going again in depth. So, we stay with them for at least 3 to 4 years. The curriculum implementation is a little difficult because it's not in English. So our mentors actually convert the entire curriculum either in Marathi or Hindi for them. So they're able to understand it. And also the whole approach, I think, is a lot more hands-on. It's more experiential because they're not really confined by space because they hardly have space where they can sit. So very often we spill the class onto our outdoor spaces and we do customize it. And, again, the child is unique, right? They're not assembly-like productions which have been given to us. So at each stage, depending on who we are engaging with, we do customize our program.
I'm going to add here to what Ritu is saying, that when it comes to government schools, we also conducted a little action research right at the beginning of our journey. And we had the Art1st curriculum being implemented in an international school, in an ICSE school, in a state school, and a vernacular school, which was a government school. And the action research showed that the results, that the children or the learning outcomes were the same in all the schools. In fact, the government schools and the state schools showed more commitment and more enthusiasm. So you see that there are no boundaries and borders. I think this works for everybody. And every child needs to just be given that opportunity.
Yes.
Thank you, Rekha.
Yeah. So we'll move to the next question. We still have time, right? We can take 1 or 2 more questions.
Yeah, 10 more minutes. 13
Okay.
We have time.
So I'll go ahead with another question. There's a question by Gopa Trivedi. She's saying the integration of art education itself is a time-consuming activity. So how you satisfy the parents, teachers, because completion of the portion and finishing the things in time. So when we integrate the art education, how you manage satisfying the parents, teachers, and the students, and even the head of the school.
Okay. Rivka, do you want me to take this, or would you like to address it?
Yes, please take this, Ritu.
Sorry. I just seem to be hogging all the questions, so being democratic here.
I will add if I need to.
Yes. How do we implement a program which is very intensive? Comes also from our learning for what we've been doing for the last 9 years. When we go into a school, we change the entire approach to art education. Our partners look at it as a core subject. So it's given that emphasis. So it's not a 30-minute period. We do a block period. We have the classes every week. They are also given help. There is a lab. So basic infrastructure, once that is put in place, what becomes important is how do you educate the parent, right? Because most parents want their children to either join an art class so they can win trophies. They also look at art more as a hobby and are unable to understand the deep relevance of how it can make them more flexible, adaptable, resilient. And I think that is the job of an educator. And we can't shy away from that. And there are no cookie cutters to say, take this pill and it's okay. No, I mean, understand what the subject is and what it brings to the table. We never question our subject teachers because we've accepted that as a norm. And whenever you bring about a shift or a change, it'll always create a lot of disturbance, but it will eventually settle down when parents see what it brings to the table. The other thing that we do when we talk of integration and even our art program is we work with the parents initially and we actually do hands-on projects with them so they understand the relevance of it. So I'm a firm believer that if you have faith in yourself and your knowledge, I'm sure you'll be able to convince your parents and your teaching community the relevance of the subject. And of course, as I said, once you are there, you do need to bring about systemic changes. Otherwise, obviously, it's difficult for one art teacher to constantly say what she wants. And very often they succumb to the pressures in school. So they don't raise their voice. But you will be surprised how each and every one of them that we have worked with, they're great thinkers. If anything, they have more knowledge of all the subjects than any other subject teacher that I know of. And I'm not generalizing, sorry. So people that in my universe I know of. I hope that answers your question, Gopa.
Yeah, we have another question. The question is about how one can inspire a child to create his perception about the lesson taught, because unless you perceive the things rightly, you won't be able to express it in art form. So what we can do, or how we can, inspire a child to generate a correct perception about the topic taught.
I said, what is correct is my question to the person who's asked this question.
Yeah, the person has asked how to.
Very unique and individual to each and every one of us. And how I perceive my world will be very different from how you perceive your world. And so I don't have an answer to your question because I think every child has a right to perceive it their way. What is important is for an educator to be able to bring to the table different perspectives that can be explored. And that is what I think is more relevant and extremely important and critical.
Yeah, in this question, basically the focus is on how we can inspire a child to have a perception, how we can inspire them.
Okay, I can talk about how you can inspire. Perception exists. Till you have your senses, you will perceive, right? So I'm not addressing that at all. I think that's something for all of us to understand. How do you inspire a child? I think very often you should question your own self as to what inspires you. When you come to school, are you coming because it's a drudgery and it's something that needs to be done? Or you come with that knowledge to say, oh my God, I have something really exciting to share with my children and let me see how they respond. Inspiration will come only if you give them inspiration. And so let me give you an example of one of our teachers. We have this concept of dots, which is one of the fundamentals of art. And there's a beautiful story of Millie who has this bag full of dots and she goes on creating this colorful world of hers. Now you can either read out the story. This is a beautiful story of dots. Or you can say, hey, I'm a magician today and I have a bag full of dots. And so this teacher carried that bag full of dots and she sprinkled the entire class with those dots. Now, can you visualize what would it be like for a child that suddenly in a classroom situation, you have these colorful dots floating everywhere? If I were a child, I would want to kind of grab all of them and put them in my pocket and maybe see what to do with it. That's how she inspired them, right? So I really think it's up to you as an educator to see how you can inspire your children. Maybe just the way you would inspire your own children at home. I think it's very similar to that because you are a nurturer.
Okay, can we have one more question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
We have time.
So the question is about how we can evaluate the work done by the students when it comes to evaluation. So how we can evaluate?
Assessment. My dear
assessment.
Sangeeta, all yours.
You know, Rekha, the debate for evaluation and assessment continues. And we've been kind of working around this, trying to see how can we get into, we don't want to get into quantification when it comes to evaluating art. So how do we get into qualitative assessments, and what kind of formative assessment ways can be used? What summative assessment is something that also challenges us. So how do we help create children's portfolios? And qualitative assessments consist about making rubrics, level-wise, grade-wise, and concept wise. So that's something, those are exercises that have been ongoing. And to be very honest, we've gone back to the drawing board this year to kind of look at, now we're looking at digital learning also. So we've gone back to the drawing board to say that, okay, let's review assessments, and our research is on that. So we created rubrics, for teachers, with rubrics are descriptors level wise, and we gave it a scale. But we found that our teachers are still not able to use those rubrics for whatever reason. And one reason, of course, is the standardized report card format that exists in schools. And once again, I must say that NEP 2020 is talking about multidimensional report card. So I'm very hopeful that there will be a lot of space and scope for the art teachers to kind of have qualitative, statements related to the child's works of art. But once again, I'm saying that, yes, we are going back to the drawing board with this and look at, okay, how can we kind of make the rubric simpler? What is the reason that most of the art teachers, a few of the art teachers have been using it, but most of them are not really very comfortable with using it. They're not able to align the students' work with the artwork. So our research is on, and hopefully another 3 months down the line, we should be able to come up with a comprehensive document on that.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah,
Rekha, just 1 minute. So I'm going to have a surprise guest on our panel today, a very dear friend, Dr. Penny Hay from University of Bath. She's in fact right here as one of the attendees. So I'm going to ask them to spotlight her. Hey, Penny, how are you? And she's done some amazing work in the space of arts integration. So maybe, Penny, would you like to share your experience so that our audience get to know more about the value of integration?
It's so lovely to see everyone, really lovely. I've just been teaching, so I'm sorry. And I will read out what I've just read out to my students. I'll just cover her surname so you can't see, but here you can see this is a piece of writing from a 7-year-old who I ran a session every week for 5 years called Being an Artist. And she came to every single session. She didn't miss a Wednesday. And I wrote it all up for my PhD. My book is about to come out, so I'll let you have a first copy. But she said this. She said to me, she was just chatting, and she said, "Do you like being an artist?" And I went, I do. I love it. What about you? And she said, "I love it." And she said this. She said, "I'm going to tell you 5 things about being an artist." So I made her write it down. Have a great imagination, then you'll have great ideas. Be positive. And don't worry if you make mistakes. Be good at playing. Be thoughtful. And art is about everything. And she signed it. So I think that was the start of how I started to write my thesis for my PhD. But I think it's fantastic. I've only joined the end of the conversation, but I will look back at the film later. but I'm so impressed with what you're doing over there in India. I wish I was with you, and I wish I wasn't just stuck here in the UK because of COVID. So let's hope that we can travel soon, but these Zoom meetings are fantastic. I'm happy to take any questions, Ritu and team, whatever you, this is my life, this is what I do.
Yeah, so I think, maybe one that I would kind of pose is, a lot of people here are a little confused as to how do they kind of bring in integration into their classrooms. And so if there's anything specifically that you would like to share, so that could be the starting point for them.
Absolutely, yes. And another time I can share more details, but I was just talking to my students just now about learning in art and through art and about art. And I think it's, art has its own integrity as a discipline, encouraging children to explore different materials to express ideas. So transforming materials to say something with them. And the importance of ideas and meanings and sense making, constructing meaning. I think also learning through art, so integrating art through the curriculum, that all of the dispositions that children are making visible through their learning, so their ability to make connections, to generate ideas, to solve problems, to think critically, to be creative, to be imaginative, all of those dispositions of an artist, that artists live these out daily, and that's why I work with artists. And I think, everybody is an artist, but it's about how we carry on that journey through our lives. And if we can integrate those processes and those practices, so it's not just about drawing or painting or printing or textiles, but it's also about observing and designing and illustrating and expressing, remembering. And I think also the notion of the kind of learning through the arts and about the arts. So the inspiration you were talking about, Ritu, being inspired by a particular artwork, using that as the provocation, a creative provocation, taking children to the forest or to the city, or taking children out of the classroom to see an exhibition, go to a museum or a gallery when we can. And I think that's why it's important to learn from artists of all cultures and all times and all contexts, so that inspiration can then follow through, and that children in the end love learning. It's that curiosity that kind of, children are enemies of boredom, and I've absolutely committed to this notion, so I'm very willing to help you in any way.
I know. Thank you so much, Penny. It's so good to see you here on this platform. Dr. Pradnya, I think if there are any questions, Rekha, we would be happy to answer.
No, now we don't have any questions, so now we can wind up. Questions are over.
Okay, so thank you. Welcome, Penny, and it's wonderful to interact with you as well. Yes, I'm very thankful. It's a enormous work you people are taking up, and I know there are a lot of challenges, but what I understand, the passion what Ritu has, that is actually take her to this long journey. And I think you can add people like us who would be interested, and also who are not, people like me who are not much aware about art, but yes, definitely the enthusiasm is there to learn about art, to learn things from different perspectives, and not only very rigid kind of a thing. So I really appreciate, Ritu, your efforts, and your I also can feel your pain when you see people, they are ending up mentioning it as a hobby class. So I understand that, and I can feel the pain what you have. So I believe that it's, when we are talking about the art, it's a very huge area, and a lot of exploration need to be done. And since you people are researching out many things, and also you are connecting the dots, I would say, so that connection of the dots are very, very important when we are talking about, either it is a classroom, either it is outside the classroom, it is maybe we talk about only the learning in terms of the numbers, but I think that is not sufficient. And therefore, when you talk about the art, and you are trying to give a wider perspective to us to look into the art, and I'm sure you will be able to do that. So I understand the two aspect in today's interaction. The one aspect, it is the pedagogy for the art teacher, so like developing the competencies of art teacher, and another is like how any teacher can integrate the art. But I agree on the fact that one needs to understand what art is. But I think to understand that, first I need to have that attitude to look into art. Because what happens with the art is, this is the same, the art is something which is very emotional to everybody. And people, they are very possessive when it comes to the emotions. I believe that we need to uh, have the broad mindsets to look into the art, and that is definitely going to give us the different perspectives to look into the art. Now, coming to the pedagogies, as Dr. Sangeeta was talking about the challenges, again I agree on it, and I believe that if we can work on the mindsets of people, then probably uh, we will be able to go ahead with a faster pace. And art is something where, as we mentioned, that it can be very closely associated with the kids, with the students, and they are very open. I also agree on the fact that the art actually help us for the abstract thinking. And what I believe today, that we are ending up only with the concrete thing. Say, for example, my marks. They are very concrete. But as a human, what I understood through the art, probably nobody can really think of it. So when I was looking at what Rivka showed us, the picture, the faces behind the mask. So I was trying to analyze those from the gender point of view. And if I get time later, Rivka, we will definitely would like to talk about it, that how gender also plays very important role when you are looking into the art. So with that, I really thank Ritu, uh, Dr. Sangeeta, Rivka, and Penny for conducting the wonderful interactive session and giving us a broad overview, because it's not possible in just 1.5 hours, but at least I'm sure that we set our mindset to proceed, and maybe we can look into the pedagogies from a different perspective. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Pragna and Dr. Rekha.
Thank you.
Just one little announcement. We will be hosting a workshop on arts integration. So any one of you who's interested or keen, please do write to Priyam. We had shared her email ID. And once, and we will kind of get back to you soon on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's
Thank
a
you.
lovely audience. Thank you.
You.